You know, it really is shocking to see just how bad this show can get. Every time I think this is as bad as it can get, Leslie Headland and company find new depths to plumb. We are now 7 episodes into this show, and I couldn't begin to tell you what the point of the show actually is. 7/8 of the way through, and it has no purpose, no direction, and no reason to exist. Oh well, we're almost done. Let's dive in, shall we? Episode 6 is quite the technical achievement. Practically nothing of particular interest occurs, and it takes forever to do so. Lots of meandering about, taking more time than necessary to perform basic actions, and conversations that take forever to arrive at the point all permeate this episode, which holds fully to Disney Star Wars cardinal rule number 4. There is easily no more than 10 minutes of actual content in this episode, and that's being generous, which has been stretched to 39 minutes with the previously on opening cinematic and credits factored in. Let's dig in and see if we can make anything from the meager offerings available. The episode consists of 3 streams of narrative: May and Sol, Osha and Chimere, and Vernestra and Mog. May is left alone on the Jedi ship while Sol attempts to contact Coruscant to let them know about the Sith. But surprise, surprise, there's some kind of interference preventing the full message from going through. You may suspect that May has done something to interfere with the ship's communications, but you would be wrong. It's just a coincidence. So then we watch May walk around the ship, seemingly switching back and forth between maybe wanting to kill Sol or maybe wanting to use her feigned identity to find out what happened back on Brindog. Meanwhile, the little beaver guy can smell that May is not Osha and works with Osha's droid to slightly irritate her instead of going to Sol and telling him the truth. At the last minute, Sol figures out who May really is and incapacitates her. He starts acting really suspicious and jumps out of the system just as the Jedi arrive to investigate. Back on Coruscant, a Jedi named Mog informs Vernestra of Sol's broken message. These two may be the perfect embodiment of Disney Star Wars cardinal rule number 1. Vernestra is sure of herself, capable and strong, while Mog is submissive, subservient, and effeminate. He cowers at Vernestra and scurries away when she is slightly irritated. Mog informs her of the broken message received from Sol about members of the Jedi team being killed. Vernestra decides that she must venture to the planet herself to investigate, despite her travel sickness. The Jedi team then travels from Coruscant to the Outer Rim, a trip that should take at minimum a week, in about half an hour, arriving just as Sol leaves. They search the planet, find the Jedi dead, and begin to suspect that Sol may have been the culprit. Vernestra uses her light whip, a weapon taken from the expanded universe canon and bastardized in this translation, to kill one of the big bugs. Finally, we have Osha and Chimere. We are introduced to Unknown Planet, which shows just how inept this writing team is. Captions and visual media are meant to come from an omniscient narrator. The narrator knows the name of the planet, so the only reason to designate this as Unknown Planet is to draw attention to the audience that the planet name is special, setting up for some kind of big reveal. Instead of allowing this reveal to occur organically, they feel the need to shoehorn it in the most clumsy and attention-grabbing way possible. I imagine it's because they don't trust their audience, and to be honest, I don't blame them. Or, the writers are stupid and believe you have to identify every planet for your audience, and they don't know the name of this one. You decide. Osha wakes up to begin the episode for like the 5th time this season. She leaves the room she's in and spots Chimere walking away. She sneakily follows him and watches as he disrobes and gets into the water to bathe. She grabs his lightsaber for him to then reveal that he knew she was there the entire time. They talk back and forth for some time, with Chimere attempting to seduce her to the dark side, parlaying any lustful thoughts she might have for him. This has gotten a lot of flack from people, and I get it. However, the issue is more in the execution than in the concept itself. Many are criticizing the use of sexuality by Chimere and his seduction, calling it deviant and out of place in Star Wars. This is a bit off. The Sith using sexuality and physical temptation has been a staple of their methods for quite a while. Darth Zana was known to use her feminine wiles in the recruitment of possible male apprentices before discovering Cognus and choosing her. Tahiri Vela, when apprenticed to Darth Caedus, uses seduction in her attempt. There was even some implications to sexual relationship between Gethany and Bane before her death on Ruzan. The problem is not what was done, but how it was done. I have no problem with the Sith using sexual temptation to lure someone to the dark side, but this is crass and erotic, 2 things that really don't belong in Star Wars. This is more cheap, lurid smut than legitimate Star Wars content. Even the Disney Plus voiceover description reads more like a 50 Shades of Grey novel than anything produced for Star Wars. Once again, not being a prude, just expecting a level of consistency. But what can you expect from a franchise that has decided canon isn't a thing to be respected? After Chimera puts his clothes back on, the two of them bicker back and forth about the nature of good and evil and the discrepancy between the Jedi and Sith. And, just as her sister, she flips back and forth more than a weather vane. Chimera explains to her how deceptive and dangerous the Jedi are, and tells her that all he wants is an apprentice of his own, and the ability to learn the Force unencumbered. He invites her to put on his helmet, which cuts out all senses except for one's connection to the Force. In the end, she does so, leaving us with nothing but the sound of her breath in the helmet. Episode 7 is a flashback, just as many suspected it would be. We return to Bryndock 16 years ago. Our Jedi group is studying the planet. We learn that 100 years earlier this planet was rendered lifeless after a hyperspace accident, whatever that means. Now, however, the planet is teeming with life. This, Sol explains, could have been caused by vergence, a concentration of force power so high it could create life. That sounds familiar. This odd occurrence isn't interesting enough to prevent Torben from whining like a petulant child because he wants to go home. Sol ventures out on his own to explore, where he happens upon young Osha and May's discussion from the previous flashback episode. He radios into Endara with the shocking news: there are other people on the planet. That means the Jedi really did come to the planet, unaware of anyone else there. Somehow, in their 7 weeks of study on the planet, they missed the massive stone fortress on top of the mountain that the lesbian witch coven live in. How is that possible? Are the Jedi that incompetent? After Sol investigates, he returns to the other Jedi and informs them that there is a witch coven on the planet, and they are raising younglings. They are preparing for a ceremony, and he fears for the girl's safety. The Jedi decide to intervene. We see a replay of the confrontation from Episode 3. When Anastasia makes her snide comment about the Jedi being ignorant of something, we know that, yes, they were ignorant of it. We then see that Torben is pulled into a trance by Anastasia, where she entices him with all that he wants, primarily returning to Coruscant. He accepts her offer, translating to the attack on him we saw in the previous flashback. The scene ends as before, with Osha wanting to be tested. On the ship, Endara states that the testing of the twins is a ruse. The girls are too old to be trained as Jedi. Despite this, Sol feels a connection to Osha and believes she is meant to be his Padawan. During the testing of May, she purposefully fails the test. Endara asks her about the ceremony and is informed it was meant to make them the leaders of the coven, despite the fact that they are children. Sol tries a different tack with Osha, which we saw in the previous flashback. Despite his connection with Osha and her desire to be a Jedi, Endara informs him that they will not be taking the girls. Torben gets the results of their M-counts and finds them to be high and exactly the same, something that should not occur, even in identical twins. The only explanation the Jedi can arrive at is that the twins were artificially created, splitting a single consciousness into two beings, something only possible due to a vergence. Torben decides this is his ticket back to Coruscant, and speeds off to get the twins, followed by Sol. We cut to the argument Osha and May had about going with the Jedi. The two are separated. Anastasia tells Osha that she will discuss her wishes with the coven, while Coral tells May that if she wants to keep Osha there, she should get angry and keep her sister from leaving. Anastasia meets with the rest of the coven. The coven is steadfastly against allowing Osha to leave, but Anastasia wonders if they should honor her wishes. May destroys the elevator controls, while Coral orders the witches to arm themselves. Sol and Torben find the entrance barred and determine the coven means to prevent the children from leaving. They decide to breach the fortress. Meanwhile, May sets the stone fortress on fire and panics. Sol and Torben are confronted by Anastasia and Coral. Sol confronts them about the origin of the twins, but any answer is interrupted by the arrival of May, who Sol mistakes for Osha. Apparently, being unable to identify this person he has a strong connection to is going to be an ongoing problem for him. Anastasia begins to dissolve like she was being snapped out of existence by Thanos, and May begins to dissolve as well. Sol ignites his lightsaber and stabs Anastasia before she is fully incorporeal, and she immediately reforms. She tells him that she intended on letting him take Osha, and then dies. Coral orders an attack. While the witches shoot space arrows at them, which Torben easily defends against, Coral tries to attack Sol. He refuses to fight her, to her frustration. It seems that the conflict might actually be able to be calmed, but the fire set by May begins to cause an explosion. Somehow. Kaunaka arrives and is manipulated into a rage by Coral. Saul and Torben are forced to fight him in a lightsaber fight, which should have lasted about 2 seconds when factoring in the increased strength of a Wookiee. Kauneka gets the upper hand and is about to kill Saul when Indara arrives to save the day. Remember Disney Star Wars Cardinal Rule number 1. She orders Saul to get the twins, setting up the scene from the previous flashback where May is assumed dead. On the way back to Coruscant, which, according to the previous episode, should only take about 2 minutes, Indara admonishes both Saul and Torben for their actions. Indara tells them that they will tell the council that May burned down the witch's fortress and only Osha survived. Saul wants to face the consequences of the part he played in the tragedy, but Indara tells him that Osha's dream of being a Jedi will be ruined if the truth comes out. The episode ends with Saul telling Osha that May started a fire. First, the good. It was assumed by almost everyone that this episode would show the Jedi to be the clear villains in the story. To my surprise, they weren't, but just barely. They were clearly the catalyst that brought about all the destruction that occurred at the fortress, but it was more a result of misunderstanding, impetuous action, and poor decision-making. The cover-up afterwards doesn't really seem to have much of a reason to exist and isn't really that big of a problem. That's not much of an improvement, but it is something. But that's about it. The characters are all morons, the technical quality of the show is lacking, and the canon, what little was left, is completely broken. This super special circumstance that created Anakin Skywalker, the Force's reaction to the abominable dark side manipulation of Darth Plagueis, turns out to not be all that special. The versions in the Force that created him, which the Jedi Council was shocked to hear of, is apparently a common event that the Jedi go around the galaxy searching for. Canon only lasts until the latest thing. The entire show has been built around this mystery of what really occurred at Bryndock. What was so bad that Kauneka exiled himself? So bad that it impacted Osha's training with Saul to the point that she left the Order, and so bad that Torben killed himself in penance. We were given one side of this conflict in episode 3, and the assumption of many was that we would be getting another flashback that would fill in the gaps. We got the second flashback, but it really didn't give us any real answers. Simple impetuousness and misunderstanding led to this problem. Tragic and regretful, but not worthy of suicide. It seems like Leslie Headland put the bulk of her writing effort into these flashbacks. You can sense from both of these episodes that they are the message. She thinks she's saying something in these episodes, and she is, but as I said in the review of the previous flashback episode, it's not what she thinks she's saying. I don't know what the point of this show is or why it exists, outside of possible money laundering. It's just more of the same Forces female, girl boss, stop the patriarchy drivel. I have no expectations for the final episode outside of the anticipation of more lore destruction and nonsensical plotting. We shall see. Thank you for watching.